that letting Cecil die after giving him a second chance was a good thing, that Cecil was unable to be rehabilitated, and so killing him was just. Another trait of a psychopath is the need for repeated stimulation. Because John felt that he was doing Cecil a favor by putting him through his test, he soon had the desire to help more people, and began to create more complex traps in his workshop. But John's good intentions would not be enough to make future traps fair or just, and before long, police would recognize Kramer's actions as the work of a serial killer.
Newspapers started calling it the Jigsaw Killer.
Hoping to do something about the decline of her marriage after losing the baby she was carrying, Jill decided to try to talk to John and give him one more chance, so she goes back into the workshop. Before finding her husband, she discovers reconnaissance photos of Cecil Adams. Cecil was believed to be missing, and Jill wondered if John had anything to do with it. He finds her snooping around and becomes very angry with her, telling her not to ever come back, effectively the end of their relationship and another sign of psychopathic behavior, impulsivity. They would get divorced not long after. After Jill leaves, he goes back to work on another trap, the glass coffin. This box would allow the user to be transported out of a collapsing room and brought to safety. John wouldn't survive long enough to use this trap himself. Instead, it would be used years later by his successor. But the fact that he was working on it way back in the 90s is a testament to John's intelligence and ability to predict possible outcomes, one of the things that makes him so dangerous as a serial killer. Despite his impressive intellect, his physical condition was about to worsen, as John was diagnosed with colon cancer not long after the divorce. Between the divorce and the cancer diagnosis, this was two straight tragedies for John. The cancer got to him while he was already at the lowest of low points, and as a result, he decided to end his life. He decides to do this Groundhog Day style by driving his car off a cliff, but miraculously, he survives the wreck. As he's lying there in the smoking mess, he realizes that he wants to live, and in order to do so, he must endure a little more pain by pulling a stake out of himself to escape. Not only was this a revelation for John in that he got to experience firsthand how testing his own will to live had supposedly healed his mind and given him a newfound appreciation for life, but it also may have inspired him to directly create the spike trap, a trap that would be used years later and required a victim to remove metal stakes from himself in order to escape. And the horsepower trap, where a victim literally experiences a car crash.
Here?
After walking away from his self-imposed car wreck, his faith in the rehabilitation method he had tried on Cecil was restored, and he may have realized that the pain factor would need to be amplified, because in order for it to work, the traps would need to test the very fabric of human nature. He got to work on some new traps as he was treated at the Angel of Mercy Hospital, where he ended up being unsatisfied with the hospitality of almost everyone working there, and marked them in his mind as future victims to be rehabilitated. The people he encountered there were mostly just doing their jobs, but because John was becoming more frustrated by the tragedies of his life, he was looking too hard for victims to punish by finding reasons that weren't really there. Over the course of the next 5 to 7 years, John began to pay more attention to the world around him as he continued to receive chemotherapy for his colon cancer. He came to meet some of the other people who he deemed unappreciative of their lives and planned to include them in his upcoming test game. A game, in his eyes, was a series of different traps involving multiple people that was supposed to add a social experiment elements to his patented rehabilitation process. Okay, it wasn't really patented, I just thought that word sounded good there, to be honest. He had hoped to do more than simply spend his time testing a series of individuals until his time on this earth expired. Instead, he wanted to create a long-lasting societal change that would impact people long after his passing by running his games and letting a survivor go on to tell the tale of their trial. When news of the horrors they experienced broke, others would be less likely to make the same mistake out of fear of becoming the next victim. John wanted to turn one random act of supposed vigilante justice into an entire movement, but soon found it could be even more than that. He decided to hold his first game as a test, and so created it and ran it in secret at a remote location, an abandoned pig farm that was still owned by his wife's family. He thought this was the perfect choice because it fit his idea of the pig icon representing rebirth. Some of the victims of this test game were people in his life at the time. This first game was a bit different than the others in that it was more about getting the victims to admit the mistakes of their past. The later games were more about putting the perpetrators in physical pain, which is usually somehow symbolic of their wrongdoing. There would be 5 players included in the barn game. There was Ryan, whose foolish actions got his friends killed back in high school, Carly, a thief who caused her victim to have an asthma attack, Mitch, who sold a faulty motorcycle resulting in the death of John's nephew, Anna, who was John's next-door neighbor and was normally very supportive of him while going through the chemotherapy, but who also killed her baby and blamed it on her sleeping husband, friend, and Logan Nelson, a resident of the Angel of Mercy Hospital who accidentally switched the labels of John's brain scan with that of another patient, which delayed the diagnosis of a tumor on John's brain. As a result of this, he wasn't correctly diagnosed until 2003, and by that point it's too late. The physicians working on his case, Dr. Lawrence Gordon and Dr. Lynn Denlin, were cold and unsympathetic towards him during his treatment, and John did not like the way that Dr. Gordon told him how long he had to live. He planned to possibly test the two doctors in future games, but for now, he had collected enough players to run his test game. So he collected them, brought them to the Tuck Pig Farm, and John Kramer's first experiment began.
Any attempt to violate my rules will kill you. I want to play a game.
When the game begins, John keeps track of the progress of each player by monitoring the rooms with security cameras. Later iterations of the games would have him physically present to make sure that the rules of each game are followed. So I'm guessing that technology was used here in the test game because two of the contestants, Anna and Logan, already knew who John Kramer was.
Hello, Anna.
Each player wakes up with a bucket on their head and is instructed to make a blood sacrifice, but Logan didn't wake up at the same time as the others, giving him an unfair disadvantage. John recognizes this and doesn't think it would be right for Logan to die because of a small mistake, so he stops the spinning saw blades and bails him out. Logan had suffered large lacerations across his back, but with John's help, he's able to have them stitched up and he survives. From there, the rest of the game plays out as planned until there were only two survivors remaining, Anna and Ryan. Wearing the updated version of the pig mask, John re-enters the game and once more sedates them. While they're unconscious, he moves them to another part of the barn called the slaughter room. If you're wondering if there's a reason that it's called that, there is, and there's about to be a second one. Ryan and Anna are locked to opposite sides of the room, and John finally reveals himself to deliver the rules of this final challenge.
Now the game's simple. Best ones are on. Have one shotgun. You have one shot.
He doesn't specifically tell them that the gun is configured backwards. The theme of this game from the beginning was for them to find salvation by looking inwards.
While I am certain that there is a desire to point fingers at me for the blood that has been shed, unless you turn that finger inward, I assure you, more blood will be lost.
The same principle ends up applying for the gun.
Now, if you want to achieve your freedom, you have to learn. You have to realize that you've been doing it backwards.
So when Anna fails to take these clues into consideration and tries killing Ryan with the gun, she ends up shooting herself. The key that would have released them was also hidden in the bullet casing left inside of the gun, so it's destroyed when Anna shoots it, and so are Ryan's chances of ever escaping. That leaves only one survivor of the test game, Logan Nelson, and he would actually